Hello, everyone. This is Chi. Today, it's the seventh episode of AI on Air for our AI on Chain episode podcast. And today, we're very honored to invite Jason, who is the co-founder and the head of engineering from Solayer, new Layer-1 chain that's very exciting to learn more about what they're doing. And maybe in the very beginning, Jason, you can give a very quick intro about yourself and how you end up being a Solayer. And by the way, guys, Jason is actually also my alumni from UC Berkeley. So very welcome, Jason, and go Bears.
Yeah, go Bears. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Very excited to sort of answer questions, share what we're doing here, and thanks again for the invitation. So I'm Jason, the head of engineering and co-founder of Solayer. We have been around for I think 1.5 years. So it's a very short period of time for Solayer. But I think there's a lot of things that's being developed and being done, being pushed out. So very excited about the progress that have happened, also to come. There's like more consumer things we're doing. So to use one line to describe what Solayer is, it's building the highest performance and lowest latency possible Layer-1 SVM chains. And right now we have a DevNet running at 100,000 TPS. You can also interact with that chain, request airdrops and do the contract deployment, interacting with dApps. Very soon we'll move on to the testnet stage. But our core focus is how to make a chain faster and lower latency, so it more becomes like a Web2-ish product to support the use cases, blockchain use cases in crypto and crypto use cases in general, as institutions bring more assets on chain, as the world gets more blockchain sort of intermediated, along with the other components that interact, for example, like dApps, payment systems, securities, and etc. So that's our focus, just being the best infrastructure company there is in the space for a public blockchain. Prior to this, I'm also a co-founder for MPC Vault, and MPC Vault's the biggest. I think it's kind of big. I don't know if it's the biggest. I think there are bigger ones. It's a business wallet company. We process about $10 to $12 billion every week on chain for on-chain transactions. It's quite extensive. It has a quite extensive customer base. It's also the foundation custody provider for some really big projects in the space, right? And it custodies about a couple billion, $6 to $10 billion worth of assets plus tokens. And we have very active DeFi funds deploying it through MPC Vault. OTC trading desks using it as a wallet system. So it's just a wallet system for teams, and a lot of teams are using MPC Vault as their so-called on-chain banking system. So that's the my brief background.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jason, for such a actually very informative intro about what Solayer is doing, and also like MCP Vault. Actually, before we jump into like more Solayer, another one question I always like to ask people, especially we know each other for a long time, and I know that before even like MCP Vault and Solayer, you started your startup and entrepreneur journey pretty early, built some very, well-known apps on in the Web2 world as well before that. So yeah, if you can briefly describe like what you did before, and also like what made you like always want to be doing startup and building products from day one. That would be very, I think, very good information to the audience as well.
Yeah. So I also had I built an app during college days. So it's like for college students to find classes, like class chats here in the United States. And we had all this EDU email verification stuff. And then we bring everyone to a big chat group. We have cohort chat. That in and of itself has, I think, a couple thousand, like tens of thousands of people. If you think about like the year of 2020, right? Year 2021. Class of 2021 for the entire university, and we're quite big amongst several universities here in the United States, especially the UC schools, University of Arizona, University of Oregon. I think we had like 80% of their newly admitted students join our platform. So that went pretty well, but monetization was an issue. So didn't sort of end up growing it bigger, but it was a very fun journey. And then prior to that, I did a lot of crypto research as part of my sort of a high school, extracurricular. Was mostly price, and blockchain data parsing. I think it was very much C++ based because Bitcoin back then was written in C++. In order to reuse the code, like you don't have to write all the parsing logic, you just import their library. So that was very much C++ based back then. Then very research oriented, calculating the power law distribution, like modeling the wealth distribution of different Bitcoin accounts or UTXOs rather, using power law distribution and stuff like that. So those are the things that that I did before, right? There's like other attempts at different various smaller stuff, but I think those are very, very small, so just not mention them for now.
Very cool. And honestly speaking, Jason, after seeing like many years that you're hustling in the startup space and trying to build a useful product for a different type of audience and users, I'm truly very happy for you for the recent success of Solayer. Yeah. So actually, that's also then goes back to Solayer. Tell us more about what is the original motivation for you guys to start building and launching Solayer in the first place.
So I was operating MPC Vault. I still am. And then we had this opportunity just to collaborate with some external parties on some certain Solana contract stuff. So we have expertise, or rather personally, I know the contract development of all the different chains because we integrated with every single one of them. Solana was something quite interesting because of its programming model, also because of its speed and finality guarantee. So I had this opportunity of collaborating with someone just to ship out a small stuff. It's like helping friends and stuff, and then it developed into something bigger. Back then, the restaking, there was this restaking meta, and we thought about restaking as a whole. It's a very interesting idea of economical security, but we also realized that it can take a long time to mature the market, right? Who is going to purchase the security and how you're going to sort of have that marketplace, because the whole restaking system is built upon taking commission of the payment. And so we don't think that would work in the short term. At least the market wouldn't flourish to the extent that people, sort of anticipated it to. So what we did was that we planned for, restaking on Solana, but then we also thought of, why don't we build our own system to accelerate the adoption of the stake that we have attracted, right? If we're successful in doing step number one. And so having the chain is always part of the plan. And my initial involvement got bigger, slowly, as sort of the roadmap expanded. And of course, it's like, opportunity sets that sort of just appeared along the way. So I think it's a very, it wasn't something planned at the very least, right? Going to Solayer, growing Solayer into a big project, especially in this climate, and doing a Layer-1 chain wasn't always planned, but I think just the market we gravitated towards what the market wanted. And with regards to why we're building an SVM, fastest SVM chain, and that's because there's a lot of user demand for on-chain transactions, and they are centered around Solana. For Solana, you don't really have a fast confirmation network. If you compare the experience with Base versus Ethereum or Arbitrum versus Ethereum, there's no such equivalent on the SVM side of things, right? If you are doing a meme trade in the rush hours where everyone is trying to go in, even for the pump, initial offering on the, I think it was Meteora, a lot of transaction would fail. And there's malicious MEV transactions happening. It happens for all, Layer-1 chains as well. So these are the things that, from a design perspective, can we have some trade-offs such that we're very different, but we offer the same appeal, right? Like we like sort of have the same characteristics, desirable characteristics as Solana. can we sort of win over, expand the market, right, and win over a larger share from EVM? So that's our thesis.
Jason, actually, I have a question here. Is that I think the high throughput blockchain is always a demand. In this case, like people, super excited about the cool technology, etc. But from my perspective, I think always the blockchain is a block space rental business. But if you look at all the existing blockchain, none of them actually at full capacity except Ethereum in this from certain perspective. Solana is built for let's say 100K, but it's really like if you exclude system transaction, it's probably just few hundred to few thousand in this case. And then
transactions per second, yes, the highest is 1.7K per second.
Yeah. So the block space on Solana is not at full capacity. Console the layer 2 is not full capacity. I wonder if like a mass adoption is actually come from utility first, or it's just you still think that the infrastructure preventing it from like my argument point that people say, hey, you don't really need a really higher throughput chain because the current chain is not utilized yet.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways to understand this, right? So first is let's look at the pure technical angle, right? The technical angle is that Solana can possibly achieve a higher TPS, let's say 2,000 to 3,000 transactions per second. But there are a lot of, even right now, right? But there are certain use cases, for example, meme trading, for example, some kind of a popular token trading that will still run into bottlenecks on the user side. And the symptoms being that first, the transactions would get stuck. Like you would send a transaction, Phantom, if you're using Phantom wallet along with Solana, they would have a waiting screen, and then it just keeps circling, and your transaction will not get confirmed. After 60 seconds, it gets dropped, right? So that's from a user perspective, that's what I'm feeling, right? Even though you can argue that Solana's capacity is not well captured or well utilized because it has to do with something related to transaction scheduling and concurrency. But that is not something, people want. There's a better user experience. Like we think about it, if you try it on Infinity SVM, it's almost instant, right? You send a transaction and know if it's okay or it's not okay, right? And there are more people, concurrency on a single market. There are more people who can put in trades that would go through, and they don't have to wait for 60 seconds before they know, right? And another guarantee is that, I wouldn't say it's guaranteed, another characteristic is that they can put in that order and they don't need to be, they don't need to be afraid of having that order sort of front run by somebody else. In the Solana case, you can front run order, and it has happened before quite frequently by the arbitrage, operators, node operators on the Solana network.
So how does that work? How your design actually not be front run by others? Like I think you're talking about some MEV in this case.
Correct, right? So if you look at Base and Arbitrum, their designs that they have a sequencer model. So the transaction building isn't really decentralized to the crowd, right? We're not doing that either. So that's the reason why people don't have, you don't have that problem on Solayer Infinity, like Solayer chain.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. So, for example, Ethereum has Flashbolt. I think the Solana has a EVM as well, right? Some MEV protocol building it. I forgot the name of it. But Jupiter, yeah. So
Jito.
Yeah. So how in this case, as you mentioned, if you are centralized sequencer, you don't have this MEV issue. But how does the how does Solayer address this MEV issue?
We have a mega sequencer. Our sequencer does not front run transactions. We choose not to, right? So we can offer a playing ground, sort of fair playing ground to everyone. If you have decentralized block building, the MEV is going to be auctioned off to validators. So it's just who gets the benefit. In my argument, I don't think MEV is MEV would benefit users, because users, especially we're talking about malicious MEV here, right? Users wouldn't get the benefit because they have higher slippage. Their slippage would be pushed to the limits that they set, right? or there's a higher failure rate because they didn't set high enough of a tolerance, and other people, because of opportunity sets on the market, they pushed the price over the tolerance, they will get a rejected transaction or failed transaction. So under no circumstances are these MEV activities reliably, how do I put it, would benefit the users. If you're targeting an end user perspective, how are we going to attract the users by providing a different set of characteristics of the chain. So that's what we're going for.
Okay, sounds good. Speak of the hardware accelerated compute. Actually, I think this is actually a common, like this is actually something similar I read from data infra world as well. For example, I think now one of the trending trends from NVIDIA is that they're trying to use, run Spark and some other compute engine on GPU. Like NVIDIA GTC conference this year, they had they built a library to help you evaluate your workload and say, hey, is this Spark workload suitable for migrate to the GPU run? In this case, there's some trending there. Even I think even in traditional data infra, like for example, AWS Redshift has experimenting use FPGA to accelerate data warehouse queries. I think that always the issue is that, for example, AWS invested tons of money use FPGA to accelerate this query engine to make a data warehouse query engine faster. But in my issue, it's not very flexible enough. They have to I think they abandon certain part and then they have to change certain part. What do you think? What do you think that I heard you also use FPGA to accelerate. What do you think about it? And then what do you forecast that this will go in the next few years?
So I think they're probably solving different aspects of the compute, right? For example, for Spark, they're solving, can I do parallelization of data processing? If can I take exponential of different rows of data at the same time, and it's inherently parallelizable workload. In many of the data processing pipelines. For example, I calculate the entire sum of the today's revenue. If I'm Amazon, right, I would have to do a distributed calculation of all the different databases and do a sum together. So they're map reducible. I don't know if that's a term, right? It's like map reducible, and then you just reduce it to a single sort of value. Whereas on the Solayer side and blockchain processing in general, I don't think it's a parallelizable problem, right? So under the bottleneck isn't really how can I parallelize all the transactions? Because you always can do that, right? You can have different shard, for example, right? But that would break the single state benefit or characteristic that people desire, which means that you can just interact with the chain and then do all sorts of things at very high speed. It's always about when there is a conflict in the write account and read account, how do you make sure that goes faster? Like the bottom line is that, right? So how can we sequence things even faster? On the EVM case, there is, the upgraded version is opportunistic concurrency, but that only works to a certain extent. It doesn't really work when there is a high conflict scenario on the account being accessed, and they would start to have rollback, and the cost of rollback is even higher, right? Because you can't really predict the account access pattern. Going to the STM, block STM is just a fancier way of doing the opportunistic concurrency model. Whereas if you move it to the SVM side of things, right? So not Aptos Sway, the move language. If you move it to the SVM side of things, we're doing pessimistic concurrency control. And by that, we mean there's upfront declared state access that developers have to somehow, ascertain that we're just going to access these accounts, are going to lock these accounts. So during the transaction processing pipeline, we will know for sure these are the accounts that will be accessed, and therefore we can do better scheduling. And the end sort of optimization you have to do is that when there is a concurrent account access all hitting the single account, how can you make it go faster, right? So that's essentially where the hardware acceleration comes in. Because for the naive case, you can just do 10 shard, right? Each shard is running at let's say 10,000. You just increase the number of shard. They don't talk to each other. But if there's no composability, it means nothing. And now going down to a single sequence of conflicting transactions, just assuming that they're all conflicting, how can we make it go faster? And that's where FPGA comes in when it comes to how can we abstract some of the kernel to kernel/operating system overhead that we have right now. How can we have faster storage, direct access to the disk? How can we have a the CPU or chip dedicated to processing the eBPF function so that the processing time gets reduced, and then the I/O time gets reduced as well. So that's where hardware acceleration comes in, and then moving top of the funnel, right? And this is where even FireDancer, when they did their demo, was talking about the use of FPGA. And that is very much similar to the use case that you just talked about with NVIDIA employing GPA to process data. It's just what I call efficiency improvement, but not on the critical path, right? So things like signature verification. When the transaction comes in, you first verify if there's enough authorization in the form of EDDSA signatures. You can parallelize that, right, with machines. You can also parallelize it with GPUs. You can certainly do it with FPGAs. They are just cost per dollar difference, right? If you think about the maintenance electricity cost, the upfront investment of the GPAs, the maintenance of the people that go into such things, or you can just put up more machines on Amazon and they all do the same work, right? Like elastic load, rebalancing of the number of machines and etc. But they're just economics change of per unit economics. They're not on the critical path. So there are essentially two ways where you use hardware acceleration to perform such tasks, right? So that's how I would understand the use of FPGAs in Solayer's context.
Okay, so I see from what I read here is that you're trying to use FPGA to break some memory war as well. I assume that's one of the bottleneck, and also in this case adjusting the just sequencing the transaction to make sure there is no resolve conflict. This conflict control, resolving conflict control.
Also, you have to lock the account the second. You have to lock the writable account the second when transaction starts for the duration of the transaction execution.
Actually, a different approach I was reading from this. I think this is actually adopting to, for example, Sui and Aptos and a few other professor. Professor Grego is doing this. The different approach they do is using FastPay and then FastPay and FastPay related follow-up paper. I think Professor Grego he started a company called PyScore. FastPay is actually solving this this dependency conflict, but it's only for like a payment. I think he's expanding this without expanded beyond payment, like support smart contract. Do you know that? Like, do you know? I wonder what's
I don't know the details, right? We'll appreciate if you can shed more insight on that. The other approach is using UTXO approach. So Bitcoin, for example, there's no dependency issue in a sense, like there's no you can build the blocks as fast as you want, right? Ideally, because one transaction after another, there's no dependency by design. So that's another structure that the industry has taken a sort of interest in. But the thing there is that from the end user perspective, the TPS is still quite low. The reason is because, for example, if I'm making it, I mean, anyone, I build custody system, right? Bitcoin is very much of a headache to actually do the integrations with. If you send one UTXO, you want to send another UTXO, or it's like assuming it's a smart contract, right? People have to interact, change the state. They have to sending another UTXO. They have to wait until the first UTXO completes. Whereas for Solana-based SVM, yes, there is a count lock, but what you can do is you can do value equals value plus one. So there is in-state calculation. Whereas for UTXO-based systems, callers always have to wait for the next one to be available, or they retry. So there's much higher failure rate attempt outside at a caller site, as opposed to Solana. There isn't much as high of a caller failure rate. they can just do +1 +1 +1 +1, the system would work. Whereas for UTXO-based systems, you have to link it back to the original state. And if the original root hash has changed or has grown, then your transaction will fail. So that's actually a big problem with, in addition to Bitcoin, there's another chain there's multiple chains that also use that particular structure. So I wouldn't say that, that's a better way to do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So Chi, do you want to, lead the, conversation to the next question we have?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I think I had some trouble with my mic for a while. But can you hear me right now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, actually, very love the conversation about the hardware and acceleration piece. So actually, I do want to go back to a bit what Jason, you talked about, the initial two things, two kind of like pinpoints you observed or you guys experienced on Solana for user when you described about Phantom, like of the wallet. Actually, for that piece, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you mentioned like the user is potentially going to wait for 6 seconds for a transaction, and then in the end still get dropped. So in that case, what's the issue you described? Is that more on like the Solana themselves, that a user cannot squeeze their transaction during the rush hour, or you're more talking about the middleware, like Phantom as a wallets themselves are not, like really being able to serve like that high throughput during the rush hour? So sorry, that part I want to make sure.
It's a network issue. It's a network issue, not really Phantom specific. And if you talk to any Solana developers who are building, either launchpads, who are building, GMGN, the ones that we're familiar with, they will have to go to Jito because they have a problem with transaction landing. So what that means is that user sends the transactions, like, keeps waiting. That's it. Especially when there's state conflict. But if you think about trading, right? Like blockchain is known for its trading use case. A lot of trading would happen because they're touching a single account, and that account is either LP account, LP pool, right? Maintaining the ratio between two pools, right? Token A and token B. There is dependency. It's going to be a serial transaction. It's like a serially sequenced chain of events. And that's where you hit the critical path of latency. And you either, increase the chain throughput, right, to have larger processing capabilities, or at the current state, assuming that you don't improve that at the state of Solana, you would pay to get your transaction sequenced first, right? So that is what Jito is doing. So people pay Jito. Like Jito revenue is like hundreds of millions of dollars per year. That's because people are paying to get their transaction sequenced first. And the number of people who are paying are actually very small. So we want to build a system where the system itself, first of all, doesn't allow such MEV activities to happen, because I'm front running you when I'm launching a particular token, right? It's like, because it's all permissionless. I don't want people to front run, etc. It's like fair play, and I don't want to have this congestion waiting time, right? And then your transaction ends up getting expired because the default expiration time for a transaction is 60 seconds. And beyond, within that 60 seconds, you can't get any assurance of if you want to retry. Say, I want to invest $10,000. And then now the app starts, waiting. Now I cannot say that let's just try again within the first 60 seconds, because my transaction has not expired. There's a chance that both can go through, right? So there isn't cancel transaction once you send a transaction out. You can only wait for expiration. So can we improve that, confirm, sort of expiration date or, guarantee as well? How can you make sure you get instant response? That's our focus here. And when you make a trade, can you make sure that when you click on the button, the numbers change? And that's sort of the guarantee we're waiting for here, as opposed to let's send a transaction and wait for a minute. That's Bitcoin actually, right? Or an hour, right, for confirmation to happen. And then we moved on to Ethereum, which is way faster. Everybody was saying that Ethereum was so fast, and of course there's also the programmability portion of it. And then we moved on to SVM, if the retail flowed to where there is much better trading experience, at least from the past market data, right? So the natural conclusion is that we should aim at building an infrastructure that gives you much better trading experience in terms of trade settlement and et cetera, right? So that seems to be where the market is going. And you have to do well in this single market context, which means that if everybody's trading the same market, there cannot be congestion. There has to be sustained high throughput, even in a single market, as opposed to, oh, they're all non-conflicting transactions, and therefore you can have 10,000 TPS. That doesn't matter at all. There are some other subtleties that would explain the inherent higher TPS on Solana as opposed to Ethereum. Like one thing is that for Ethereum, like token ERC20 transfer, there's dependencies. You cannot reliably parallelize to USDC transfer. But on Solana, you can reliably parallelize two USDC transfers because they don't touch the same accounts. Whereas for Ethereum, it's totally different. So there are like other things that would make the argument why SVM is in general faster. But there's a specific trading use case which is the hardest of all that we're optimizing as the goal.
Understood. Actually, I'm very glad that you're talking about some of the use cases. That's also like what I'm very interested from. Again, like technology is great, scalability, performance is great. In Web2, we all also come from infra background. We all talk about those, but in the end, it's because like there's a business needs for that particular use cases. So or like that particular TPS scalability. So actually, that's why I would love to then here dig into more. And before I dig into more, it's funny that you mentioned Jito that's made hundreds of millions of revenue per year. That is also why exactly sometimes I hear some people are joking that in some way Jito kind of like hijacked the Solana ecosystem as well, because like all the, it's like you have to pay them to get there.
And the thing is that paying them, if it's a fair marketplace, I think it's okay, right? The thing is that you actually have to apply to them to get the API keys. So it's not a percentage transaction. You have to apply through a Google form so that they give you the credentials to set So that's where the part gets a little bit tricky. If it's a decentralized system, right? Like
exactly
non-discriminating against anyone, there's like no human touch in there. That's a different setup, right? You can call it a purely competitive dynamics on its own. But this is where you need to click on a link and apply and get in touch with them. So I think, I mean, just to build on your point, I hear that's where I hear some complaints from, right, too.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's called hijack, right? You have to go through some, it's not like a permissionless or enough to be fair. So actually then goes back to the use case itself and some, like you say, some of the hard trading use cases. Let me ask you a direct question here. Are you guys competing or trying to compete with Hyperliquid? Because I think that's some of the,
I think, how do I put this? If we were to do something of our own product suite, right? I think that is, Perp platform is definitely in our wheelhouse and also in the direction in terms of giving the least competitive pressure to other ecosystem projects from a chain, right? Because from a chain, we don't want to do everything. If we were to pick one thing that would make the most economical sense, leveraging whatever we have built, right? I think building a decentralized perpetual, transparent perpetual is where we're going. It's the most likely outcome. And now talking about competition, I don't really see it as competition. I mean, you have to define the market, right? Assuming that the amount of people and the amount of capital that's going to trade on decentralized exchanges are going to stay constant. That's if you're assuming that's the same, right? And then we're definitely competing, right? But if you are assuming that now we include centralized exchanges, which have all kinds of how do I put it? Have some uncertainties on how the rules are being enforced, right? And people want to see more transparency. And if you assume the money is going to flow into the more transparent setup, the transparent way of clearing, auto deleveraging, then it's a growing market. If you do this, right? It helps Hyperliquid, helps us. And now, if you assume that the more RWAs can be put on chain, and there is like more access in terms of giving capital opportunities to take leverage to hedge their positions with a wider range of assets than just Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, which are the three biggest perpetual pairs, then you would assume a industry-wide inflow and of assets, which would be good for everybody, right? So really depends on the state of the markets and how the money flows and how you see the market as a whole, right? It could be sort of harmful or not as beneficial to Web2 players who are in a totally different market. It really depends on how the market sort of shape up. And we're of the view that this is a growing market. Crypto, blockchain-based, financial instruments, assets, we're of the view that it's a growing market. So we don't see it as a competition, even if we do it. And other people might do it too, right, along the way. I don't think we're short of perp platforms or decentralized perp platforms. So in that regard, I don't think we're competitive.
Makes sense. And honestly speaking, I think it's very important to, even exactly like you phrased, even sometimes it's competitive, but as long as it's like a growing market, that's all of them are pushing towards the same goal, and apparently that's a better kind of like approach than some of the old approach. Then to me, that's definitely not zero-sum game. It's actually growing the pie together type of game.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. So actually, then besides prop trading, any other use cases or like a product suite that you guys are considering that high level, what's the roadmap? What's the like a go-to-market you guys are thinking? So now you have a foundational, like infrastructure that's can be high throughput, low latency. What else?
Yeah, I mean,
what else use cases?
The rest is just an ecosystem, right? Like the typical things of growing an ecosystem. We probably wouldn't get involved in any of the on-chain, swaps or whatever platform that's going to be there. But we just want to see an ecosystem flourish. And now there are really two ways to do it, right? One is to take an opinion and then build something yourself. In our case, we might do something, perpetual related, and grow the ecosystem at the same time. Another way of doing it is to see growing ecosystem as a primary strategy, right? So in the second case is where you deploy a lot of capital in terms of grants, in terms of getting builders in terms of getting all the incubation and stuff. We don't take that approach just because we don't think the ROI has been very good. Having tracked the sort of code of progress for other chains, we just don't see the progress. Like we're asking ourselves, can we do better, right? Like how can we do better than them? Have we raised more money? Probably no, right? Have we sort of have a more industry contact? Are we going to do it at a better market climate than they did, whatever they did? No, right? So if the questions were no, then we were just like, it's hard for us to say that here's a bunch of grants, you guys go and do it. And I'm pretty sure you guys are going to stay. I think no, right? Because we also believe in that capturing values in order for them to stay. If we think about, decentralized, world, people talk about this ethos of having everything as truly decentralized, transparent, and etc. But people don't eat, that doesn't pay the bills for whoever is developing it, right? The Ethereum days, Ethereum got very big without thinking about anything. And it was because there's an active inflow of users, capital, and all the ICOs going on Ethereum, because Ethereum was the only platform where that was permitted to do so, right? Was possible to be carried on. Now, Solana is much tighter game, right? You see all the US institutions getting involved. It's like this fast, in addition to it being fast and fast and lower latency than Ethereum, it's still a lot more effort, right? And you still don't really see as vibrant of an ecosystem in terms of DeFi especially on Solana as you compare it to Ethereum. Now, Solayer is in a much tighter spot when it comes to the natural favorable climate, especially from retail euphoria of ICOs and all these other stuff. So we want to be very careful with how we manage things, especially if the goal is to do it in the longer term, to pursue whatever strategy that will be ultimately beneficial and fruitful for the entire ecosystem here at Solayer.
You actually touched a very, very good point that, honestly speaking, internally we debate a lot because we're sort of like a Solayer, right? We're not trying to also build a general purpose chain because we felt like for all the reasons you just described, and plus, like even a lot of general purpose chain, even if you think about, they had some good RI in the previously better environments with the grant and all the stuff, but does that sustain across like many years? Like now, well, all those grants they gave out to, like Web3 projects or even like Web2 companies, does that like really retain? Like we talked about in the Web2 products, it's like acquisition is very important, but the retention of the customers are more important sometimes.
Yes.
So how much those users and how much those traffic retain here. So I think that's definitely it's kind of like people. I think not only you, us, a lot of like a great brands who constantly think this through or like put effort into trying to build a better blockchain industry and the ecosystem have also been. I think a lot of people have kind of like similar observations, similar kind of concerns that whether the old playbooks can work here, or we need to find a better way here. So that's why I think, yeah, one, I pretty much very agree with what you're saying. And also that's why we now consider like, is that, especially given that now, with so many general purpose blockchains, and like Scott mentioned, most of the chain actually, for whatever reasons, don't have their block space sold, like a couple of it's actually still a very big gap from like what so-called the high throughputs they have versus like the demand from the business side can like fulfill those scalability and performance they theoretically can offer to people. So in that case, what is the better way potentially? If we look at recently that's why like Hyperliquid, everybody talk about them, like they're doing so great, they solve real problem and all the stuff. But if you look at now, they also have their own chain, all this stuff. What is the real, like they're very laser focused, as almost like their way of approaching this industry is kind of like a Web2 company. They solve a real use case with a real product first. And it's kind of like a very verticalized approach rather than like I go straight as a general purpose chain. And then all the grants, all the ecosystem I need to build is like, oh, I need to build something for DeFi, GameFi, SocialFi, everything. And then it's become like super hard to focus and to grow like one use cases that's, very, like with a high adoption and all the stuff. So yeah, anyways, I think that's, so what you said, I think very much agreed upon.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, besides the again, like the trading use cases, recently we also saw that you guys made some announcements on your Twitter about like the launch of the what's the card, Emirate Card.
Emirate Card.
Yeah, Emirate Card, and also you guys launched your own Solayer stablecoin, SUSD, and all the stuff. What's the intention behind those? That's part of your product suite as well.
I think so SUSD is a very simple product and has a very direct, it's simple in many ways. First of all, the value proposition is very simple, right? It's like TBO, right? And like treasuries, you can hold it in TBOs and it's like well-regulated custodian and everything. People want to have access to US yield. It's the safest yield. It's not high. It's not the highest rather, but it has the biggest carrying capacity. You can go to tens of billions of dollars, exhausting all the capital there is in the blockchain world. It's still able to carry the same amount of capital at that yield. Second thing is that's very easy for users to do that maintain and conversion, right? It's like T+1 and all that. third things like maintenance, and we use partners like OpenEden for the actual custodian and the operations of the TPO. So Solayer manages the on-chain liquidity and the sort of decentralized RFQ systems that we have established. So from an implementation perspective, it's also very easy. So this is a very easy product, in our view. And then the card was something we wanted to. So we're building use cases, right, for the chain in preparation for the chain launch itself. We're thinking, can we take it to the market? Can we do it more efficiently prior to the establishment of a bigger ecosystem, so that when the ecosystem prospects come, they will see that, oh, there are some users here, right? Because everybody wants to see that. Nobody wants to build a chain where there is nothing. You either give them a lot of money, in which case that I don't know if they will be self-sustainable, or you give them opportunities because there are a lot of users. Right? It's like you have to have one of the two is how we think about it. And then the card is also retention mechanism for users. If you think about anyone who is on Solana, active on Solana, they must have USDC. Can they spend their USDC? I think it's a common problem that people have. So can we do something over there? And leveraging some of the experiences we have. MPC Vault is actually doing all the settlements for with the card networks and everything. The refund, the authorization amount got decreased because there's a partial refund. So we got it together pretty quickly, and I think it's very well received by the community. But the intention behind is like, first, there's a use case. Second is long-term user retention, and that's it. Like we just want to have a way to convert attention back then, right? When we launched so-called TGE, the industry sort of focused on that a little bit more than subsequent stages of the project. Then how can we capture that attention? As you mentioned, retention is something we think about a lot here at even if we're building a chain, right?
So in that case, can I then, if let's see if my summary is correct. So actually, what you for like again like the SO or SUSD and the card themselves is not necessarily, let's like say like that key use case or use cases why Solayer is such a needed infrastructure here for the community or like for the blockchain industry. So more like, but it's more like the use cases we talked about, like trading, some of like the, like when there's like a lot of transaction hit or single accounts type of hard use cases. But you also need almost like a phase 2 type of products that make the people who are interested in using Solayer in the first place, or like have the attention to Solayer because of TG, whatever reason, to have a good reason to stay, because they can earn yield, they can get some benefits, credits, whatever from the card. So in that case, that's just kind of like it's more like the product suite for the retention.
Exactly. I think the industry went from a low cost of acquisition period. That was Ethereum ICO days. You do anything, you shout in Twitter, a lot of people following you, money starts flowing towards you. I've seen that, right? Over the years to, and even if you fork Bitcoin, there's a lot of people buying, right? Because they don't even care. And exchange listing free. And the exchanges actually go to projects to say, can I list you, please, right? I'll pay, I don't know if they pay people, but can I list you, please, right? You come here, as opposed to going to other exchanges just to list on me, right? Like I'll have everything for you for free, right? To the date where inbound and acquisition becomes very expensive, in the form of both exchanges having much more negotiating power over projects, and in the form of KOLs asking a lot more than I think what the previous round or batch of KOL was asking. And in terms of the results that they're delivering, just like per dollar spent, to now, right? It's just like, it's vastly different. So anything that would have user retention, up for Solayer is a big money saving for us if we were to continue expand, helping ecosystem projects expand, get the mind share. So that's the general thinking here.
That's awesome. Yeah, love the thoughts. And honestly, I think this is why, I really sometimes think like the people who have been building products in the Web2 industry had some good framework that can actually be also translated, transferred, and into the Web3 world, especially given that right now, like you said, again, like all those environment micro dynamic has been changed, but also I felt like the way how people would value and really think about the token price of a project more is definitely gearing towards that. You need some real things here. You need some real potential product utility, aka like real potential revenue generators. Then like how you can retain and grow those revenues, aka retain and grow your customer base. That's, I think, it's definitely one of the trends we observed in the market as well.
Yeah, I think it's from the general euphoria, there's transition towards pervasive cynicism about the space. I think that's something that's happening in the background. And for us, for all the builders, I think there isn't just like this neutral market climate. It's like somewhat of an aggressive market climate that people are building in. So I think it's just a market change, right? But I do think regardless of how the market changes in general, I mean, the general sentiments, I think finding a use case, being able to generate revenue, it's very important. People didn't talk about it when there was this, massive amount of inflow of capital into crypto, but now that's gone. I think people are starting to, realize that more and more down to the ground, and less about I'm building this to be more decentralized. The founders have to disappear in order for the project to be successful. There were a lot of extreme, I wouldn't say extremist, but let's say extreme visionaries. I don't know. They would take things to the very extreme to attract attention in order to get the result is that they got a larger slice because of their, unorthodox theory. And then maybe people thought that their unorthodox theories was the reason why sort of justified crypto, and that's embodiment of crypto. And therefore you have to be very different for capital to come, for a larger portion of the capital that was coming to the space to come to you, just to be weirdly unorthodox. And I think that was a period of time. And now we're past that, right? So it's interesting to see how the space evolved in the last 4 or 5 years. I think it was something quite memorable. Yeah.
Agree. Cannot agree more. It's definitely definitely we felt very differently, which I do think in general this trend or this environment where the environment is marching towards is being more friendly. I think it's actually been more friendly to the true builders, because I think the builders usually view or trying to the biggest value they can bring to the ecosystem is actually build something useful. And I think that has been a foundation that has been kind of like overlooked for quite some time in the industry, and hopefully is where the trend start. And also that's why sometimes it's like we're joking about, especially recently, as you also pointed out, right? Like Solana, if we look at this year, last year there's tons of meme, there's tons of very down to earth, extremely retail type of focused use cases. But this year it's like do the switch, and suddenly it's like institution focused, and not only Solana. I think almost like everybody in the big blockchain crypto ecosystems are kind of like talking about how we can get more big financial institutions on the back and support us. And also that's why tons of companies start adopting or ecosystems start adopting a MicroStrategy approach to get more connected to or tap into the liquidity of the Web2 stock markets. So that's why in some way it's kind of funny to see how centralized this type of approach is becoming. But on the other side, I felt like I do think crypto in some way do need this type of more kind of like a big brother coming and make it more compliant and more foundational driven than just like you say, like extreme narrative driven and ethos driven. So I think that's kind of like, we will see how it goes, but I felt like hopefully in the end we will find a balance.
Yeah, I think that's definitely sort of interesting, and see looking at how the industry has evolved and predicting where it can go from here.
Yeah. Scott, you have been very quiet for, like 20 minutes. So any questions for the last 5 minutes?
I wonder what's any initiative on Solayer about AI side? I think like AI is changing the whole world. What's your initiative on AI? What's your view on AI? What's your initiative on AI side? Yeah.
So that's a very great question, right? We have been thinking about AI a lot. I think the biggest relationship between Solayer and AIs that we're using, and we're forcing people to use a lot of AI tools from within the company. There's like no narrative between Solayer and AI that we are creating or something. We're still like, very pragmatic. We think that's our use case. We want to go there in terms of high performance chain and the trading experience. But I don't know how the AI space is going to evolve, right? There are projects that are very AI themed and that got recently listed, and they do crowdsourced or decentralized scale AI. I think that's very easy to understand for people. But we are not there yet. I guess it's fundamentally a different kind of business. I do think AI is going to change many, many things at a scale that our compute is scaling up because of hardware innovations, chip level innovations, or software-ish, and by software-ish stuff, I mean the rack, look-aside memory, and then more efficiency gains using GPUs with faster response times, like speculative decoding, GPU level optimizations, topology aware algorithms. I think the space is going to go quite fast. So far, I think if you look at Facebook, right, they are very much determined to make them the go-to platform. I think search is going to be fundamentally changed, and that the winners between, I think, OpenAI, Google, and Facebook. I think one of them is going to be the winner, most likely. And agent, I think, based AI that's just in different industries, right? I see it as a better SaaS tool. More smarter SaaS tools, more human time-saving SaaS tool approach. And then I think the big area next is robotics. How can we enable robotics to be of help to every person? Because previously it was not able to do so, primarily due to the complexities of handling edge cases. How can we, with AI's, sort of help fill in the gap of the edge cases? So I think robotics going into much more domains, like we saw industrial robotics come up because it was very repetitive, predictive in a very highly refined, confined settings. And now how can we bring that same setup to more complex real world scenarios where, can you clean this better? Can you fold the, clothes better? Can you build a house? Can you remove grass? Can you water the plants? Can you do, whatever that had to be done by human labor better because AI is filling in the edge case processing capabilities that previous ML-based algorithms, which had very defined input and defined output. It's more like defined input, right? Couldn't really take on, right? So I think that's where you see that capability with compute, more like this end-to-end, like Tesla is doing end-to-end models that outperformed a lot of rule-based in modular AI models chained together. And I think if you look at the general end-to-end model is really natural language to natural language, because the input space is orders of magnitudes bigger. Even for Tesla's end-to-end model is still vision, like camera to drive action. It's still very much that. But once you take the input and output space to natural language, there is that infinite amount of things that you can actually express, right? And I don't know what's the more order of magnitudes, but it's definitely going to be a lot higher than what Tesla had. So I think in general, very bullish on the increase in compute and the generalization of input and output. I think those two are going to drive a lot more use cases and combinations to empower things that we are seeing right now and to invent things that we haven't seen.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think we're on to time. But before we go, Jason, so actually, that is where I think, like if we go down to earth a bit more, like back to the initial use cases that you guys are kind of like focusing on, I think that will be a good adoption of Solayer's tech as a trading. I think that is where I think potentially that there's some good synergies that we can work together. So for us, because we are kind of like focusing on, like being that base layer for agentic internet, the first use cases that we are kind of like focusing on right now in data is like agentic commerce, about like agentic shopping and all the stuff. And again, stablecoin, like on-chain type of like payments is a very natural solution for agents to adopt, especially given that you can together pair that with unique identity that can be cryptographically verifiable. But after that, actually the second use case, we do think it's very important to tackle the control, the trust, and like the trust there is actually potentially, it's actually the trading use cases. If you really think about, especially some of the use cases you talking about, like the almost like the high frequency trading that's involved, that's usually is the scenario that's machine involved. So maybe like people are not using like agents to do trading, but in that cases right now, even you want to attract companies, I do think there's a lot of like machine learning or like AI algorithms they're using there to accomplish that. So it's not a surprise to us that one day people are trying to adopt more like the agentic workflows in that. But then when it comes to that, it's extremely important not only have like the trading infrastructure be ready for them, but again, like how you can, have a better control to the agents when they move the money, because that's become very scary for a human to really give the AI or agents that access to their wallet and all the stuff. But anyways, yeah, that is where I think potentially that's is the use case that we can explore some synergies together there.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy. I mean, Solayer is very open to collaborations. Are happy to sort of hop on the discussion on how we can sort of further the co-marketing approach, branding, and collaborations going forward.
Yeah, definitely. So before we go, Dan, anything that's excite you that you want to share excite you the most about Solayer in the next, like a couple of months or in the next 1 year? Like, what is the thing that's what is the last kind of like words or message you want to share with the community?
Yeah, I mean, personally, because I'm leading the engineering side of things, we're working on testnet deployment very soon, like right now. So we have calls every day. We have like daily calls just on sync up on the engineering side. Right now, we're working on testnet deployment, and that's coming really soon. So personally, the most exciting thing for me is just to launch the testnet and see how it does. I mean, technically how it does, right? Like, can it be stable? Even for so-called mega sequencers, there's like failover mechanism that we have to design to maintain the uptime, availability that we have to guarantee for the chain state. How do we design it? Like mostly technical things that would make me very excited.
Perfect. Awesome. So in that case, then I would imagine usually we ask people where can they find you, but if I know that you guys have a lot of like the social media presence, but if you also want to still talk about what is the best approach to best way to approach you guys, where like reach out to you guys, where they should go.
Yeah, I think we have a decent sized, like 12, I think 10, 15 people. I don't know. And we have like for technical stuff, you can always just either go to Twitter or go to our developer docs, and we have Telegram channels where developers can join to ask questions, and then we'll have people respond to that. And then for non-technical marketing, whatever else related, it can also just go on Twitter or Discord. There are people who are dedicated to helping out in terms of answering questions and stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jason, for today's very, I think it's quite insightful conversation. And thanks for the education about, what you guys are thinking about the hardware acceleration. I found that part is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, it's great to have the opportunity to share what we're doing. And thanks again for the invitation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And good luck with everything. And thank you for the audience as well. So have a good day or good night.
Yeah,
Bye, guys. Yeah. Bye-bye.